Well, hi, everyone, and I want to welcome you to Unstoppable Mindset, where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet. And today, I guess we get to talk about the unexpected because we're going to be chatting with Chris Miller. Chris is in Australia and has been very heavily involved in business continuity and emergency management. And we'll talk about all that. But what that really comes down to is that she gets to deal with helping to try to anticipate the unexpected when it comes to organizations and others in terms of dealing with emergencies and preparing for them. I have a little bit of sympathy and understanding about that myself, as you all know, because of the World Trade Center. And we got to talk about it in London last October at the Business Continuity Institute, which was kind of fun. And so we get to now talk about it some more. So, Chris, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. We're glad you're here.
Oh, thanks very much, Michael. And I was very impressed by your presentation because in the emergency space, preparedness is everything. That is the real return on investment. So you're a wonderful case study of preparedness.
Well, thank you. Now, I forget, were you there or were you listening or watching virtually?
I was virtual that time. I have been there in person for the events in, London and elsewhere. Sometimes they're not in London. Sometimes they're in Birmingham and other major cities.
Yeah.
But, I have actually attended in person on one occasion. So it's a long trip to go to London to go, but most of the time it's virtual.
Yeah, it is. It's a little bit of a long trip, but still it's something that it is a subject worth talking about, needless to say.
Absolutely. And it's one that I've been focusing on for more than 50 years.
Goodness. Well, and emergencies have been around for even longer, but certainly we've had our share of emergencies in the last 50 years.
Sure have, in your country and mine.
Yeah. Well, let's start maybe, as I love to do, tell us a little bit about the early Chris growing up and all that sort of stuff. That's fun to talk about the early days.
Well, I came from a family that loved the mountains, and so it was sort of natural that I would sort of grow up in the mountains, close to where I was born in Brisbane in southeast Queensland. And we have a series of what we call coastal ranges or border ranges between Queensland and New South Wales, which are two of the largest states in Australia. And so I spent a lot of time hunting around there. So I sort of fell into emergency management just by virtue of my parents' love of the mountains and my familiarity with them. And then I joined the police, and in no time at all, I was training other people to do search and rescue. So that was me in the early days.
What got you involved in dealing with search and rescue?
It was volunteer in those days. It still is now, actually, with the State Emergency Service, but it's sort of become more formalised. It used to be sort of, friends and family and people that knew the territory would help out when somebody managed to get themselves a bit tangled up. Some of those coastal ranges, even to this day, you can't use GPS because it's rainforest.
Mm-hmm.
And so the rainforest canopy is so dense that you'd have to cut trees down, and it's a national park, you can't do that. And or climb the tree, good luck with that one. You still can't get satellite coverage, so you actually have to know the country.
But what what caused you to actually decide to take that up or volunteer to do that? That's pretty interesting, I would think, but certainly something that most people don't tend to do.
Well, my family's interest in that. My parents have always been very community minded. So, and it's the Australian way. If someone needs help and you can help, you try and do so.
Okay, that makes sense. So you joined the police and you got very much involved in dealing with search and rescue. And I would presume, knowing you, that you became pretty much an expert in it as much as one can.
Oh, well, I wouldn't be so reckless as to say expert because there's always so much to learn, and the systems keep changing. I mean, what with GPS and And for instance, in the early days of search and rescue, helicopters were a rare treat. Now they're sort of part of the fabric of things. And now there's drones and there's all sorts of high-tech solutions that have come into the field in the lengthy time that I've been involved in. It's certainly not just tramping around the bush and hoping to find someone. It's a lot more complex than it
But
was.
as you pointed out, um, there are still places where all the tech in the world isn't necessarily going to help, is it?
Exactly. And interestingly, my mother, in her teenage years, was involved with a fellow called Bernard O'Reilly, and he did a fantastic rescue of a plane crash survivors. Uh, and um, and he claimed that he saw a burnt tree in the distance. Well, I've stood on the Rift Valley where he claimed to see the burnt tree, and my goodness, his eyesight must have been better than mine because it's a long way. But he was a great believer in God, and he believed that God led him to these people and he saved them. And it's fascinating to see how many people over the years have done these amazing things. And Bernard was a very low key sort of fellow, never one to sort of seek publicity, even though he got more than he probably wanted. And there've been television series and movies and goodness knows books, many books written about this amazing rescue. So I sort of grew up with these stories of these amazing rescues, and my father came from Tasmania, where his best friend David headed up mountain rescue. So I sort of was born into it. It was probably in my genes.
And it just
no escaping.
you came into it naturally, needless to say. So that, just out of curiosity, you can answer or not, but where does all of this put you in terms of believing in God?
Oh, well, there's probably been points in my life where I've been more of a believer than other.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of things that happen that oftentimes we seem not to be able to explain, and we chalk it up to God's providence. So I suppose you can take that as you will. I've talked about it before on Unstoppable Mindset, but one of my favorite stories of the World Trade Center on September 11th was a woman who normally got up at 7 every morning. She got up, got dressed, went to the World Trade Center where she worked. I forget what floor she was on, but she was above where the planes would have hit and did hit. But on this particular day, for some reason, she didn't set her alarm to go off at 7 a.m. She set it accidentally to go off at 7 p.m. So she didn't get up in time, and she survived and wasn't in the World Trade Center at all. So what was that? You know, there are just so many stories like that. And it certainly is a reason to keep an open mind about things, nevertheless.
Well, and I've also worked with a lot of Aboriginal people and with the World Bank, with other people that have perhaps beliefs that are different to what we might consider more traditional beliefs in Western society. And it's interesting how their spirituality, their belief system, has often guided them too. So.
Well, there's something to be said for that, needless to say. Well, so did you go to college, or did you go out of whatever high school type things and then go into the police, or what?
Yes, I joined the police from high school. I completed my high school graduation, as you'd call it in America, at the police academy.
Where?
In Brisbane, in Oxley. And then the Queensland Police Academy, and subsequent to that I went to university part-time while I was a police officer and graduated, and so on and so on.
So you eventually did get a college degree?
True.
Okay. Well, but you were also working, so that must have been pretty satisfying to do. But getting
it was tricky to, especially when you're on shift work, trying to study and hold down a more than full-time job.
Yeah, it had to be a challenge.
It was, but it was worth it. And I often think about my degree and the learnings I did in psychology and sociology, and how I often think a university degree, it isn't so much the content, it's the discipline and the analysis and research and all the skills that you get as part of the process that's important.
Yeah, I agree. I think that a good part of what you do in college is you learn all about analysis, you learn about research, you learn about some of these things which are not necessarily talked about a lot, but if you do what you're supposed to do well, those are certainly traits that you learn and things that you develop in the way of tools that can help you once you graduate.
Absolutely, and continue to be valuable.
Yeah.
And this was sort of reinforced in the years when I was a postgraduate at the University of Queensland, and was one of the representatives on the arts faculty board, where we spend a lot of time actually thinking about, what is education? What are we trying to achieve here? Not just be a degree factory, but what are we actually trying to uh, share with the students to make them better citizens and contribute in various ways.
Yeah. I know that last year I was inducted as an alumni member of the Honor Society Phi Beta Kappa, and I was also asked to deliver the keynote speech at the induction dinner for all of the students and me who were inducted into Phi Beta Kappa last June. And one of the things that I talked about was something that I've held dear for a long time, ever since I was in college. A number of my professors in physics said to all of us, one of the things that you really need to do is to pay attention to details. It isn't enough to get the numeric mathematical answer correct. You have to do things like get the units correct. So, for example, if you're talking about acceleration, you need to make sure that it comes out meters per second squared. It isn't just getting a number, but you've got to have the units and other things that you deal with. You have to pay attention to the details. And frankly, that has always been something that has stuck with me. I don't, and I'm sure that it does with other people, but it's always been something that I held dear. And I talked about that because that was one of the most important things that I learned out of college. And it is one of the most important things that helped me survive on September 11th, because it is all about paying attention to the details and really learning what you can about whatever you need to learn and making sure that you have all the information and you get all the information that you can.
Absolutely, and in the emergency space, it's learning from what's happened. And
Right.
even though many of the emergencies that we deal with, sadly, people die or get badly injured or significant harm to their lives, lifestyle and economy and so on.
Yeah.
I often think that the return for them is that we learn to do better next time, that we capture the lessons and we take them from just lessons identified to lessons learned, where we make real significant changes about how we do things. And you've spoken often about 9/11, and of course, in Australia, we've been more than passingly interested in what the hell happened there.
Yeah.
In terms of emergency management too, because as I understand it, you had 24/7, 9 months of firefighting in the tunnels. And of course, we've thought a lot about that in Australia. We have multi-storey buildings in some of our major cities. What if some unpleasant people decided to bring some of them down? They would be on top of some of our important infrastructure, such as metro tunnels and so on. Could we manage to do 24/7, 9 months of firefighting? And how would that work? Do we have the resources? How could we deploy people to make that possible? So even when it isn't in your own country, you're learning from other people's emergencies to prepare your country and your situation to be in a better state of readiness should something unpleasant happen.
I wonder, speaking of tunnels, it's just popped into my head, so I'll ask it. I wonder about, we have this war in the Middle East, the Israeli Hamas war. What have we learned about or from all of the tunnels that Hamas has dug in in Gaza and so on? What does all that teach us regarding emergency preparedness and so on, or does it?
Well, it certainly teaches us a lot about military preparedness. Yeah, yeah. And your enemy suddenly popping up out of the underground
Yeah,
to take you on, as they've been doing with the IDF, as I understand it.
yeah,
But also, simplistic solutions. Like some people said, well, why don't you just flood the tunnels and that'll deal with them? Except the small problem is if you did that, you would actually make the land unlivable for many years because of salination. So it just raises the questions that there are no simple solutions to these challenging problems in defence and emergency management. And back to your point about detail, you need to think about all your options very carefully. And one of the things that I often do with senior people is beware of one-track thinking. There is no one solution to any number of emergencies. You should be thinking as broadly as possible and bringing in the pluses and minuses of each of those solutions before you make fairly drastic choices that could have long-term consequences. Like the example of the possible flooding of the tunnel. Sounds like a simple idea and has some appeal, but there's lots of downsides too.
much less the fact that there might very well be people down there that you don't want to see perish. So it's not
Yes,
always
like
just
your
the enemy.
hostages
Yeah,
that
the
you might like
hostages are
to
there.
have returned to their families. I'm sure they'd like that. And there may be other people. I understand that they've been running medical facilities and doing all sorts of clever things in the tunnel. And those people are not combatants. They're actually trying to help you.
Right. Yeah. So it is one of those things that really points out that no solutions are necessarily easy at all. Um,
Mm.
and we need to think pretty carefully about what we do because otherwise there could be a lot of serious problems. And you're right.
Exactly. And there's a lot of hard choices and often made hastily in emergency management. And this is one of the reasons why I've been a big defender of the recovery elements being involved in emergency management. You need the recovery people in the response activities too, because sometimes some of the choices you make in response might seem wonderful at the time, but are absolutely devastating in the recovery space.
Right. Do you find that when you're in an emergency situation, that you are afraid, or are you not afraid, or have you just learned to control fear? And I don't mean just in a negative way, but have you learned to control fear so that you use it as a tool as opposed to it just overwhelming you?
Yeah, sometimes the fear sort of kicks in afterwards, and because often in the actual heat of the moment, you're so focused on dealing with the problem that you really don't have time to be scared about it. You just have to deal with it and get on to the next problem because they're usually coming at you in a pretty tsunami-like way.
Yeah.
If it's a major incident, you've got a lot happening very quickly, and decisions need to be made quickly, and often with less of the facts than you'd like to have at your fingertips to make some fairly life-changing decisions for some people.
But I would think
and
go
it's
ahead.
tricky.
Yeah. But I would think what that means is that you learn to control fear and not let it overwhelm you, but you learn that, yeah, it's there, um, but you use it to aid you and you use it to help move you to make the decisions as best you can, as opposed to not being able to make decisions because you're too fearful.
True, and decision paralysis can be a real issue. I remember undertaking an exercise some years back where a quite senior person called me into his office when it was over. It was just tabletop. And he said, I'm not it. And I went, huh? He said, no, I'm not really a crisis manager. I'm good in a business as usual situation where I have all the facts before me. And usually my staff have had weeks, months to prepare a detailed brief, provide me with options and recommendations so I can make a sensible decision. Said, I'm not really good on the fly. This is not me. And that's what we've been exercising as a senior team, making decisions rather quickly. And he was a mature enough person to realise that wasn't really his skill set.
His skill set, right?
But he said, but I got a solution. I thought, oh, good. My head of property. Now, in many of the businesses I worked with, the head of property, IT, HR, work health and safety, security, all sorts of things go wrong in their day. You know, they can come to the office and they think they're going to do, this is my to-do list, and then all of a sudden some new problem appears that they must deal with immediately. So they're often really good at dealing with whatever the hell today's crisis is. It may not be enough to activate the business continuity plan, but it's what I call elasticity of your business as usual. So you think you're going to be doing X, but you're doing X plus Y because something's happened. Right. And you just reach out and deal with it. And those people do that almost on a daily basis, particularly if it's a large business. For instance, I work with one business that had 155 locations in Australia. Well, chances are something will go wrong in one of those 155 locations in any given day. So the property manager will be really good at reaching out and dealing with whatever that problem is. So this senior colleague said, look, you should make my property manager the chair of this group. And I will hand over delegations and be available, for advice. But he should lead it because he's very good on the fly. He does it every day. He's very well trained in it by virtue of his business as usual elasticity. Smart move.
And it worked out?
Yes. Yeah, we exercised subsequently and it did work. Because he started off by explaining to his colleagues his position, that the head of property would step up to the plate and take over some more senior responsibilities during a significant emergency.
Okay. So how long were you with the police and what did you do after that?
I was with the police for nearly 17 years. In Queensland. I had a period of operational work in traffic. I came from a family of motorcycle and car racing type people, so
yeah,
it was a bit amusing that I should find my way there. And it actually worked out while I was studying too, because I had a bit of flexibility in terms of my shift rostering. And then when I started my master's, my first master's, I sort of got too educated, so I had to be taken off operational policing and put in the Commissioner's office.
And what did you do there in the Commissioner's office?
Yes. So I was much more involved in strategic planning and corporate planning and a whole lot of other smart moves, which made the transition from policing actually quite easy because I'd been much more involved in the corporate stuff rather than the operational stuff. Mm-hmm. And it was a hard transition. I remember when I first came out of operational policing into the Commissioner's office. And, God, this is so dull.
Yeah, sitting behind a desk, it's not the same.
Not the same at all, but it meant when I moved from policing into more traditional public service roles, I had the sort of requisite corporate skills because of those couple of years in the Commissioner's office.
So when you, what caused you to leave the police and where did you go?
Well, interestingly, when I joined, I always planned to leave. I sort of had three goals. One was get a degree, leave at 30, and there was some other thing. I left at 32. and I was headhunted to become the first female workplace health and safety inspector in Queensland. And at the time, my first and now late husband was very unwell, and I was working enormous hours. So I was offered a job with shorter hours and more money and a great opportunity. So I took it.
Which gave you a little bit more time with family and him.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So that was that in an emergency management related field?
Workplace health and safety, it can be emergencies.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Well,
hopefully not.
Yeah.
Because in the workplace health and safety space, we would like people to prepare so there aren't emergencies.
Right.
Well, from time to time there are. And so I came in. What happened was we had a new act in Queensland, new Work Health and Safety Act. Prior to the new act, the police, fire and other emergency service personnel were statutorily excluded from work health and safety provisions under the law in Queensland. The logic being their job was too dangerous. How on earth could you make it safe? And then we had a new government came in that wanted to include police and emergency services somehow or other. And I sort of became, by default, the work health and safety advisor for the Queensland Police at the time. There was no such position then, but somebody had to do it, and I was in the Commissioner's office and showed a bit of interest, saying, hey, you can do that.
It's in the training.
And I remember a particularly pivotal meeting where I had to brief the Deputy Commissioner about whether police would be in or out of that legislation, because they had to advise the government whether it was actually possible to include police.
So what did you advise?
Well, I gave him the pluses and minuses, because whatever we decided, it was going to be expensive.
Yeah.
If we said no, politically, it was bad news because we had a government that wanted us to say yes. And if we said yes, it was going to cost a lot of money to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. What finally happened?
Yes, won.
Yes, won. Well, yeah, the government got its way. Do you think that made sense to do that? Was yes right?
It always was.
Mm-hmm.
It always was right, because it was just nonsense that
police aren't included.
To exclude, because not every function of policing is naturally hazardous. Some of it is quite
right,
straightforward and can be made safe.
Right.
And even the more hazardous functions, such as dealing with armed offenders, it can be made safer. There are ways of protecting your police by increasing their bulletproof attire and various other pieces of training and procedures. It's not impossible. It just takes time and effort.
But also part of that is that by training police and bringing them into it, you make them more aware, which also has to be a positive in the whole process.
Absolutely. And I did quite a lot of work with our some people used to call them the black pajamas. They were our top of the range people that would deal with the most unpleasant customers.
Mm-hmm.
And they would train with our military. In Australia, our counter-terrorism people are trained with the military. The police and military train together, because that expands our force capability if something really disagreeable happens.
So it's got to start somewhere. So all this wasn't necessarily directly related to emergency management, although you did a lot to prepare. When did you actually go into emergency management as a field?
Oh, well, so I was involved in response when I was talking about rescue, search and rescue. And then increasingly, I became involved in exercising and planning, writing procedures, training, all that getting ready stuff. Mm. And then a lot more work in terms of debriefing, so observing the crisis centres and seeing if there could be some fine tuning even during the event, but also debriefing. So, what did we actually learn? What do we do well? What might we do better next time? Are there some insights that the people that were most involved might have picked up as a result of this latest incident, whatever that might have been?
Mm-hmm. And so where did you end up where you actually were formally in the emergency management field?
Well, emergency management is quite a broad field. So
Yeah.
it's preparedness right through to response and recovery and everything in between. And so I've had involvement in all of that over the years. So from preparing with training and exercising right through to it's happening, you're hanging off the helicopter skids and so on.
So did you do this working at
Sorry,
various?
I've come back from Europe with a bit of a cold.
Ah,
So through to response and recovery, you know, how are we going to respond? What are our options? What are our assets? Through to recovery, which is usually a long tail. So,
mm-hmm.
for instance, if it's a flood, a fire, or so on, it'll take a very long time to recover. You know, 9/11, you didn't rebuild towers and rebuild that area quickly. It took years to put things back together again.
Yeah. The only thing about it is one can only hope that as we put things back together and as we move forward, we also remember the lessons that we should learn from what happened in the past.
Absolutely.
And I'm not sure that that always happens.
True. And that's why I often get a bit annoyed when I hear particularly politicians talk about lessons learned very hastily after the event. You know, they say, we'll learn the lessons from this or that. And I go, you think? Because for those of us involved in the debriefing and lessons management space, we know that you have observations, insights, lessons identified, but they're not learned usually until some considerable period thereafter, where you make the necessary changes to training procedures, whatever it might be, so that those learnings are embedded in the way forward.
Yeah. And not everybody learns the lessons who should learn the lessons. And they don't always listen to the people who really do understand, but you can only do what you can do as well.
Well, we've tried to structure more of that with lessons management so that it's a lot less hit and miss. I mean, when I first came into emergency management, it was much more a sort of learning on the job, sometimes learning bad habits from people, and then gradually, hopefully, setting aside the bad habits and getting into the good habits.
Yeah.
Now you can do a master's and PhDs in disaster management, thank goodness, so that we become much more sophisticated in terms of our evidence base and our research and our understanding. And as I said, this crossover. So we learned a lot from what happened with 9/11 that might be applicable here in Australia should something unpleasant in our larger cities happen too. So we learn from each other. It isn't a static environment. It's very much a fluid environment and one that's moving forward, I'm happy to report.
Well, and that's important that it moves forward and that we learn from what has happened. Now, of course, we have all sorts of things going on over here with air traffic controllers and losing communications and all sorts of other things that once again causes people to need to learn how to very quickly react and make strong decisions and not panic with what's going on. I heard on the news this morning about somebody who saw two aircraft that were about to collide, and he was able to get them to divert so that they didn't hit each other, but radar hadn't detected it. So, they're just the people are very resilient when they learn and understand what they need to do.
And I've had the honour of working with air traffic controllers and doing some exercises with them. They're actually amazing people.
Yeah.
For a number of reasons. One is the stress levels of their job is just beyond belief. But two is they actually have to think in 3D. So they've got their radar screens, which are 2D, but they actually have to think in 3D, which is a really rare and amazing skill. It's like a great sculptor.
Yeah.
In Europe, I've seen some wonderful sculpture. They actually have to think in 3D in terms of the positioning of their aircraft and how to deal with them. It's a great set of skills, so never to be underestimated. And of course, it raises the question of aging infrastructure and an aging workforce too. Something that in a lot of countries, yours and mine, it seems, we've been quite neglectful about legacy systems that we have not upgraded, and about the aging workforce that we have not invested enough effort in terms of bringing new people into the system, so that as our long-time warriors want to retire, and they're entitled to that, can leave, and knowing that there will be more useful replacements taking over.
I flew last week, and actually for one of my flights sat next to an air traffic controller who was going to a meeting, which was fascinating. And same point was made that a lot of the infrastructure is anywhere from 25 to 50 years old, and it shouldn't be. It is so amazing that I guess I would say our politicians, even though they've been warned so many times, won't really deal with upgrading the equipment. And I think enough is starting to happen. Maybe they will have to do it because too much is failing. But we'll see.
And that's a worry when people are doing things that are so important hastily. And interestingly, when I was exercising Sydney air traffic controllers, I actually got a glimpse of a new high-tech solution that they were in the process of testing, which was going to put more cameras and more capability around the airfield than they'd ever had before, even though they're sitting in an $80 million tower that we built for them with Australian tax dollars. But trying to get the system even more sophisticated, more responsive, because the flight levels coming in and out of Sydney continue to grow. 90% of Australians' air traffic goes in and out of Sydney at some point in the day.
Yeah.
So they're very busy there. And how can we provide systems that will support their capacity to do better for us and continue to maintain our safe spots?
So we met kind of through the whole issue of the Business Continuity Institute conference last year. What's the difference between emergency management and business continuity management?
Interesting. When I came out of emergency management, so things like the Bali bombings, the Indian Ocean tsunami, and so on and so on, a deputy in the Department of Social Security, where I used to work, said, "Oh, we need a business continuity manager." And I sort of went, "What's that?"
Yeah.
Excuse me. Hey, what's that? Well, I quickly learned it's basically a matter of scale. So I used to be in the business in emergencies of focusing on the country, and I did counter-terrorism, or significant parts of the country, flood, fire, and so on, to one business at a time. So the basics of business of emergency management come across very neatly to business continuity. You're still preparing and responding and recovering. just on a smaller scale.
Because you're dealing with a particular business at a time.
True.
Whereas emergency management is really dealing with it across the board.
It can be the whole country,
Yeah.
depending on what it is that you do in the emergency management space or a significant part of the country.
When did you kind of transition from emergency management and emergency preparedness on a larger scale to the whole arena of business continuity?
Well, I still keep a foot in both camps. Actually, I keep boomeranging between them.
Ah,
It depends on what my clients want. Since I'm a consultant now, I move between both spaces.
when did you decide to be a consultant as opposed to working for a particular organization or the government?
I was a bit burnt out, so I was happy to take a voluntary redundancy from the government, and my consultancy practice developed from there.
When did that start?
October of 10.
October of 2010?
Yep.
Okay. So you've been doing it for almost 15 years, 14 and a half years. Do you like consulting?
Yeah, I do, because I get to work for people who actually want to have me on board.
Ah.
Sometimes when you work as a public servant in these spaces,
Yeah.
you're not seen as an asset, you're a bit of an annoyance. But when people are paying you as a consultant, they actually want you to be there.
Yeah. Which counts for something, because then you know that you're going to be more valued, or at least that's the hope, that you'll be more valued because they really wanted to bring you in. They recognize what you brought to the table, as it were.
Yes. Now, that's not to say that they always take your recommendations.
Yeah.
And I would learn to just, provide my report and see what happens.
So was it an easy transition to go into the whole arena of business continuity? And then, better yet, was it I gather it was probably an easy transition to go off and become a consultant rather than working as you had been before.
Well, the hours are shorter and the pay's better.
There you are. That helps. Tell us.
It does.
Tell me if
And
you would.
I've got a lot more flexibility and control over my life that I didn't have when I was a full-time public servant.
Yeah. Yeah. And that of course counts for a lot, and you get to exercise more of your entrepreneurial spirit.
Yes, but I think one of the things is I've often seen myself as a very expensive public asset.
Mm-hmm.
The Australian taxpayers invest a lot of time and effort in my training over very many years. Now they're starting to see some of the return on that investment.
Well, and that's part of it. And the reality is you've learned a lot that you're able to put to use. So you bring a lot of expertise to what you do, which also helps explain why you feel that it's important to earn a decent salary or a decent consulting fee. And if you don't, and people want to just talk you down and not pay you very much, that has its own set of problems, because then you wonder how much they really value what you bring.
Yes. But now, through the World Bank and my international consultancy work, I'm sharing some of those experiences internationally as well.
So you mentioned the World Bank. Who are some of your clients, the people that you've worked with?
The World Bank doesn't like you talking too much about what you do.
Yeah. That's why I was wondering more, what are some of the organizations you worked with, as opposed to giving away secrets of what you do?
Well, for the World Bank, I basically worked in the health sector, in Africa and in APAC.
Okay.
And that's involved working with ministries of health, trying to get them in a better state of preparedness, get their plans in better shape, get them exercising those plans, all that kind of important stuff. Stuff that we kind of take for granted in our countries. In yours, well, with FEMA, although what's left of FEMA now,
Yeah.
But also in my own country, you know, we're planning and exercising and lessons management and all these things are just considered, you know, normal operations. When you're talking to low and middle income countries, no, that isn't normal operations. It's something that they're still learning, and that you have the honour to work with them to try and bring them into that sort of global fold about how these things are done.
Well, you worked in some pretty far away and relatively poor countries and so on. I assume that was a little bit different than working in what some people might call the more developed countries. You probably had to do more educating and more awareness raising also.
Yes and no. The African country that I worked in, a lot of these people had studied at Harvard and some of your better universities. But what I noticed was, as brilliant as those people were and as well trained and educated, there weren't enough of them. And that was one of the real problems is trying to expand the workforce with the necessary skills in emergency management or whatever else you might be trying to do, pandemic preparedness or something. Trying to have enough people on the ground in those countries that have the necessary skills and experience.
Were you able to help change that?
Yeah, we set up some training programs, certainly. And hopefully some of those continue beyond our time with them.
So again, it is some awareness raising and getting people to buy into the concepts, which some will and some won't. I remember while at the Business Continuity Institute, one of the people said the thing about the people who attend the conferences, they're the what if people, and they're always tasked with, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? But nobody listens to them until there's really an emergency, and then of course they're in high demand.
Hmm.
Which
Well,
I can understand.
that's why you want exercises, because it raises awareness so that the what ifs that the business continuity people are thinking about, the emergency managers, are a bit more front of mind for some of the senior people, so that it's less of a surprise when something unpleasant happens.
Yeah. Well, how is the whole concept and the whole structure or theory of emergency management changed? You've been involved in this a long time. So how has it evolved and changed over the years?
Much more education, formal education, not learning on the job, actually going to university and learning properly, but much more evidence based, much more structured lessons management, much more technology. There's so many changes, the list to be very long.
Does AI come into play in emergency management yet?
I think it's coming in more and more. We're using it for prediction of fire behavior and all sorts of things now.
Yeah. And that makes sense that we're starting to see where the whole technology and the whole ability to monitor so many things can tell us there's a fire starting or something is happening a lot more quickly than we used to be able to do it. I'm not sure that we're there yet with earthquakes, but even with earthquakes, we're getting warnings a little bit more quickly than we used to. We had an earthquake here in Southern California a couple of weeks ago, and I forget exactly, but it was a number of seconds that people had some decent warnings. So by the time it was analyzed and determined that there was going to be an earthquake, there was still time to issue a warning that alerted people. Of course, you still had to react pretty quickly if you wanted to take advantage of it. But I think that we're only going to see more and more technological changes that will help the process be better.
Absolutely. And one of the big problems that we're having is a lot of our previous sort of fire mapping, fire behavior, flood mapping is out of date very quickly because of development and climate change and all sorts of factors. Um, Previous behaviours are not actually a very good model. And AI permits us to do things faster.
Yeah, we're going to have to just continue certainly to encourage it. And again, it's one of those areas where the reality is all of the skills that we and tools that we can bring to the process are absolutely appropriate to do, because otherwise we just either take a step backward or we don't progress at all.
Well, and to give you another example, our lifesavers, New South Wales lifesavers here, run the largest drone fleet in the country. Now, for a long time, lifesaving used to be sort of volunteers and pretty old tech. Not anymore. Oh boy! And they're even looking at things like deploying life-saving devices off their drones as they get bigger and smarter and heavier lifting to be able to drop things to people in distress. We're using it for shark netting, whereas we used to take a boat out and check the shark nets. Now we can send the drones out, and then
Yeah.
if you need to send the boat out, you're not wasting a lot of money um, chugging up and down in your boat. So there's all sorts of savings and adjustments in this space in technology with AI and all sorts of other fancy devices like drones.
How about emergency management and so on in terms of dealing with different kinds of people, like people with disabilities, people who are blind or deaf or hard of hearing, maybe heavy people, people who are in the autism spectrum and so on? Have emergency managers gotten better at dealing with different kinds of disabilities? How much real awareness raising and understanding has gone into all of that?
Well, towards the end of last year, there was a big package of work done by EMA, Emergency Management Australia, in conjunction with ADARE, the Australian Institute of Disaster Resiliency. And that's in the disability space. And a whole lot of that's rolling out in workshops all over the country to try and do even better. Yes, it's still a weakness, I would have to agree. And we still need to do a whole lot better in that whole space of some of those vulnerable groups that you mentioned. And hopefully some of this important initiative that's sponsored by the government will help raise awareness and improve response activities in the future.
I would also point out, and it's of course all about training to a degree, because people say, well, blind people can't do this, for example, or they can't do that. And the reality is blind people can, if they're trained, if they gain self-confidence, if they're given and put it in an environment where they're able to be given confidence to do things. The reality is blindness isn't the challenge that most sighted people would believe it to be. But at the same time, I think that one of the biggest things, and I saw it on September 11th, one of the biggest things is information or lack of information. I asked several times what was going on, and no one who clearly had to know would say what was occurring. And I understand some of that because they didn't know whether I would just panic because they said airplanes had deliberately been crashed into the towers or not. But also, I know that there was also a part of it which was, well, you're blind, you can't deal with any of that. We're not going to tell you. We don't have time to tell you. Information to me is the most important thing that you can provide. But I do appreciate there are two sides to it. But it is also important to recognize that with a lot of people who happen to have different kinds of disabilities, providing information may very well be an enhancement to their circumstances because they can make decisions and do things that they might not otherwise have been able to do.
Well, it was certainly the case for you because you had information and you had preparedness before 9/11.
Right.
You were able to respond in more effective ways because you knew what was what. And we certainly saw that in COVID, for instance, even things like translating information into different languages.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in Australia, we have people from, I think, the last census, 170 countries. They don't all speak English as their first language. And having worked with Aboriginal people for 8 years, quite specifically, and one of my dear friends, English was her sixth language.
Mm. But at the same
So,
time, go ahead.
yeah, and yet we keep putting information out in
In one
English and
language,
hope that
yeah.
everyone can just work it all out. Well, no, we need to do much better in the language phase, in the preparedness phase of people with all sorts of challenges. We need to reach out to those people so that as you were prepared for 9/11 and you knew where the fire escapes were and this and that, that really paid benefits on the day, that we've done that we've taken reasonable steps to prepare everyone in the community, not just the English speakers or the this or that,
Right.
that all people get the chance to understand their situation and prepare appropriately.
I know that if I had had more information about what had occurred, I may very well have decided to travel a different way to leave, or after leaving the tower and the building, I might have gone a different way rather than essentially walking very much toward Tower 2 and being very close to it when it collapsed. But I didn't have that information because they wouldn't provide that. So,
Not helpful.
yeah, so things do happen. So, I'm sure that along the way you've had funny experiences in terms of dealing with emergencies and emergency management. What's the funniest kind of thing that you ever ran into?
I'll come back to the alpacas. But just quickly, that whole crisis communication space is also a big development in emergency management.
Yeah.
For a long time, we kind of kept the information to ourselves, but we realised that knowledge is power. We need to get it out there to people. So we do a lot more with alerts on the phones and all sorts of clever things now.
Right.
But funny things, well, there's so many of those. Which one? Probably most recently is the dreaded alpacas. Where I live now, as you see, well, as some people who might see the video of this, I live by the beach, which is pretty common for a lot of Australians. Anyway, we have had fires up in a nice valley called Kangaroo Valley. And a lot of people that live there are sort of small farmlets. There are some dairy farms and people that are more scale farmers, but other people just have a small plot. Excuse me, maybe a couple of horses or something or other. And then when we had fires up there a few years back, we set up emergency evacuation centres for them, and we set them up for dogs and cats and small animals. And we had a facility for horses at the nearby race grounds and so on. But we weren't expecting alpacas. And alpacas are actually quite big, and they spit and do other. They're quite hard to manage. So I remember we rang up the race course manager and we said, "We've got alpacas." He went, "What? You got what?" I said, "Well, they're sort of about the size of a horse." He said, yes, but we know what to do with horses. We know what the hell to do with alpacas. Anyway, eventually we moved the alpacas to horse stables and kept them away from the horses because we weren't sure how the two would interact.
Yeah.
And the owner of these alpacas was so attached to her animals that she insisted on sleeping in her car near her alpacas. So some people are very attached to their animals, even if they're a little on the large side.
Yeah. Well, I know during the fires that we had here in Southern California back in January, there were a number of people who had horses and were very concerned about evacuating them. Of course, other animals as well, but the horses especially were dealt with, and they had they had places to take them if they could get the horses out. I don't know whether we lost horses or how many we lost, during all the big fires. But yeah, you just
we
never know.
had serious fires near Canberra, which was my city of residence for many years. And what happened? What happened was quite often the men were off fighting the fires, and the women were left with smoke affected horses,
Oh,
and they were trying to get them onto the horse float. Now, as we quickly discovered, horses are pretty smart, and they're not keen on being near fires. They don't want to be there,
right.
so they become quite a challenge to move. And to put a horse float onto your vehicle is no easy thing when you've never done it before and you're trying to do it in a crisis. So when all that was over, one of the lessons that we did learn was we arranged to have a sort of open day at the nearby race course where they actually taught people to put the trailer on the back of the vehicle to deal with a fractious horse, to sort of cover its face or protect it from the smoke and do all sorts of helpful things. So sometimes when we get it wrong, we do learn and make some important improvements like that.
What's the kind of most important advice you would give to somebody who's new in emergency management or interested in going into the field?
Sign up for a good course. Do a bachelor or master's degree in emergency management, because not only will you learn from your instructors, you'll learn from your colleagues. And this is a networking business.
Yeah. Well, I want to, have you, I haven't asked you, have you written any books?
No.
You haven't. Okay. Because if you had, I'd ask you to send me book covers so that we could put them in the show notes. Well, there's something for you to look at in the near future. You could learn to be an author and add that to your skill repertoire. I want to thank you for being. Yeah, well, there is always that, right? Too many emergencies to manage. Well,
Indeed.
Chris, I want to thank you for being here, and I want to thank all of you for listening and being with us today. I hope that this has been helpful and interesting and educational. I found it so. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'm sure Chris would as well. Chris, how can people maybe reach out to you if they'd like to do so?
Yeah, sure. LinkedIn is a good way to find me, and I've given you all those details. So
Why don't you go ahead and say your LinkedIn name anyway?
Good question.
Yeah.
It's B4 Crisis is my business name.
Before B and the number 4 crisis.
That's it. And my LinkedIn name is
So it's
Chris Miller B4 Crisis.
Yeah. And your email
Chris
is
Miller B4 Crisis. Or find me on LinkedIn.
Chris Miller at B4 Crisis. And
yeah,
email is
number 4 Crisis.
And in email it's B4 no, it's Chris Miller B4 Crisis again, isn't it?
Or it's Chris at B4Crisis.
Chris at b4crisis.com.au. Yeah, yep. Okay.
Indeed.
I had it memorized and I forgot it.
The reason why it's letter B number 4 crisis,
right,
is I like to see my clients before the crisis,
right,
but I know they'll be more motivated after the crisis.
Well, I hope that you'll reach out to Chris and find her on LinkedIn, and all the information is in the show notes. She is right, but I always like to get people to say it if they can. I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to email me at michaelhi, M-I-C-H-A-E-L-H-I, at accessibe, ACCESSIBE.com, or go to our podcast page, www.michaelhingson, that's MICHAELHINGSON.com/podcast. Podcast singular, that is. Wherever you're listening or watching, please give us a 5-star rating. We really value your ratings and your reviews and input. We appreciate it. And for all of you, and Chris, you as well, if you know of anyone who ought to be a guest or you think should be a guest on Unstoppable Mindset, we're always looking for more people to talk with and have conversations with. So please introduce us. We're always excited to get that kind of thing from you as well. So once again, Chris, I just want to thank you for being here. This has been fun today.
Thank you, Michael. It was fun for me too.